Esther Soper was born approximately 1923 or 1924 in England. Her maiden name was Copeman. Her father was a man named Stanley Copeman. England in 1923 and 1924 was a country still finding its footing after the devastation of the First World War. The war had ended in 1918, but its shadow fell long across the years that followed. Hundreds of thousands of men had not come home. Families across the country carried grief that had no easy resolution. The economy was unstable. Unemployment was high. In the early 1920s, ordinary working people in England lived in a world of tight budgets, close communities, and modest expectations. Most families lived in terraced houses. Women kept the home. Men worked where they could find it. Children were raised within walking distance of where their parents had been raised. Church and chapel were the anchors of community life. It was into this world, recovering, resilient, and quietly devout, that Esther Copeman was born. Esther grew up and in time married a man named Norman Soper. Norman was a working man in the truest sense of the word. He found employment at Devonport Dockyard in Plymouth, one of the largest and most important naval dockyards in Britain, which had for generations provided steady work for men across the city and the surrounding area of Devon. Norman and Esther built a life together in Plymouth. They had children. In time, they became grandparents. Esther was described by those who knew her as a much-loved mother and grandmother, a quiet, peace-loving woman with apparently no enemies in the world. Faith was central to Esther and Norman's life together. Both were long-standing members of the Exclusive Brethren, the strictest branch of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. The Exclusive Brethren were not a casual congregation. Membership shaped every aspect of daily life. Members did not socialize with people outside the church. They did not form friendships with those who lived outside the faith. Meetings were attended regularly and devotedly. The community was close-knit and largely self-contained. For Esther and Norman, this was not a burden. It was simply the life they had always known and the faith they had always held. Those beliefs, however deep and sincere, came with a cost that most people outside the Exclusive Brethren would find difficult to comprehend. When Esther's mother died, and her father Stanley Copeman eventually remarried, his remarriage placed him outside where Esther's faith permitted her not to accept. The rules of the Exclusive Brethren were clear and uncompromising. Esther ceased all contact with her father. By the time of her death, she had not spoken to Stanley Copeman in 15 years. She also had no contact with her own daughter, who lived nearby, because her daughter lived outside the church. The faith came first. It always had. Norman Soper died around 1973 or 1974. His death was sudden enough that those who recalled it described him as having died at quite a young age. Esther was left alone. She remained at 9 Tremerton Terrace in Mutley, a quiet terraced street in an inner suburb of Plymouth, sustained by her congregation and her faith, and almost entirely unknown to the neighbours who lived on either side of her. She was a widow in her early 50s, living alone, keeping herself to herself. Her world was small and ordered. She attended church meetings regularly and devotedly. She was, in the words of those who knew her through the Exclusive Brethren, a dedicated and peace-loving woman. Outside the church, she was barely known at all. By the end of 1975, Esther had made a decision. 9 Tremerton Terrace was too large for one person. She put the house on the market. Plymouth and the county of Devon in 1976 were part of a Britain in the grip of economic difficulty. The mid-1970s had been a turbulent period across the country. Strikes, power cuts, rising unemployment, and a cost of living that put pressure on ordinary households everywhere. Plymouth, with its deep dependence on the naval dockyard and its associated industries, felt those pressures as keenly as anywhere. The city was working class at its core, proud of its naval heritage and accustomed to getting on with things without complaint. Mutley, where Esther lived, was a neighborhood of terraced houses and corner shops, of people who knew their streets and went about their lives quietly. It was not a place that expected the extraordinary. New Year's Day, 1976, fell on a Thursday. The city was quiet in the way it always is on the morning after New Year's Eve. People sleeping late, curtains drawn, the streets still and unhurried. At 9, Tremerton Terrace, Esther Soper was preparing her house for a viewing. A man had come to look at the property a few days earlier, giving his name as Clifford Sparks to the estate agent. He had made a second appointment to view the house again. That appointment was for New Year's Day. Sometime during that Thursday, Esther Soper was murdered in the hallway of her own home. She was bludgeoned with a heavy glass cider bottle. She was then strangled with her own stockings. Her body was wrapped in a curtain. The house was left ransacked. Esther did not drink. She was a member of the exclusive brethren, and alcohol played no part in her life. There was no alcohol anywhere else in the house. The cider bottle had been brought to 9 Tremerton Terrace by whoever came through her door that day. The killing had not been impulsive. It had been thought about in advance. That evening, Esther failed to appear at a church meeting. For a woman of her devotion and routine, an unexplained absence was immediately cause for concern. 2 members of the exclusive brethren went to 9 Tremerton Terrace to check on her. They found the front door unlocked. They went inside. At around 9 o'clock that night, they found Esther's body in the hallway. Devon and Cornwall police launched a murder investigation. At its peak, more than 80 detectives were working the case. Door-to-door inquiries spread across Mutley and beyond. By August 1976, approximately 33,000 people across the world had been interviewed by police in connection with the murder. It remains one of the most extensive investigations ever mounted for a single murder in the southwest of England. The primary focus fell on the man who had given his name as Clifford Sparks. He had been to the house. He had made a second appointment for the day of the murder, and he could not be found. Police tracked down and interviewed 9 men named Clifford Sparks across the United Kingdom. Not one of them could be linked to Esther or to 9 Tremerton Terrace. The name, detectives concluded, was almost certainly false. It was noted at the time that it was not unheard of for estate agents to use invented names for potential viewers. Whether Clifford Sparks was such an invention, or whether it was a false name given by a man who intended to return and commit murder, was never established. In 7 months of inquiry, involving 80 detectives and 33,000 interviews across the world, not a single person was arrested, questioned under caution, or charged in connection with the murder of Esther Soper. No suspect was ever formally identified. Nobody was ever brought in. The investigation was wound down after 7 months. In the long history of British murder inquiries, the complete absence of any suspect in a case of this scale is almost without parallel. The case went cold. In 1997, Devon and Cornwall police revisited it. Items of Esther's clothing were sent for DNA analysis in the hope that advances in forensic science could provide what the original investigation could not. The results were a bitter disappointment. Only Esther's own DNA was found on every item tested. There was nothing from her killer, no hair, no skin cell, no trace of any other person. Strangling someone with their own stockings requires close physical contact and the direct handling of clothing. To leave no trace of any kind suggested a degree of deliberateness and preparation that went far beyond an opportunistic attack. Whoever killed Esther Soper had been extraordinarily careful. In 2004, the case was reviewed again. A retired detective spoke publicly about it and noted that Esther had been a member of the Plymouth Brethren and had not socialized with the wider community. Police stated they found no evidence directly linking the murder to the exclusive Brethren itself. The question of whether the house sale, the false name, and the timing of the viewing were connected has never been answered. Esther's father, Stanley Copeman, from whom she had been estranged for 15 years, spoke to the Plymouth Herald after his daughter's death. He said he couldn't understand why anyone would want to kill her. He described her simply as a truly lovely person. The murder of Esther Soper is the oldest unsolved murder in the southwest of England. She was a mother and a grandmother. She was a woman of quiet and complete devotion to her faith. She had lived at 9 Tremerton Terrace in Mutley, in a world bounded by her church and her congregation, and had been preparing to move somewhere smaller when her life was ended in the hallway of her own home. On New Year's Day, 1976, someone came to her door. She let them in. She was killed. Hello everyone, thank you for listening, and drop any feedback below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I hope to see you again in the next case right here on Cold Case UK.